Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 6 of the anime series Myriad Colors Phantom World. And it's not as if I can fault this episode for at least not being somewhat interesting, though I gotta say I'm really heavily reminded of just a couple episodes back now. Going kind of sort of in the mind of Reina and, like this place of zen, this place of equilibrium that was born out of her mind with her alternate world bunny rabbit parents and how goofy that was and everything like that. We're kind of in the same vein in this episode, although that was much more phantom induced in that case. We're very much, this is a product of Kurumi's mind, much as I was speculating at the end of the last episode discussion video. I was saying I half assumed that the next episode would be focusing on Kurumi and a little bit more about her powers and, how she feels about things, getting to know her, and that's very much what we had with this episode. And it's her own sort of self-doubt and going internal, going into her mind, and these are all products of her imagination on display. And once again, we start the episode with this sort of, not necessarily directly tied in, but talking about that comfort zone we have as children, or at least the majority of us do, in a safety blanket, or, whatever you want to call it, a stuffed animal, and just things that we need to keep ourselves passive. I mean, you think of infants, sometimes they need a pacifier. That's where it gets its name. So all those kinds of things, security blankets, stuffed animals, your favorite toys, being around your best friends or whatever. Or in the case of what is, steadily unfolding with all of the characters in the series, they all have, one reason or another to feel sort of pulled back from society and friends and all this kind of stuff. Although we do get some insights into the fact that Kurumi has made friends in the past, but now that she's sort of involved with these people that she's kind of overwhelmed by, Mai and everybody, Haruhiko and Reina and all that kind of stuff, these people who look just all kinds of badass to her, and she's like awestruck by them. She's like, how can I ever live up to that? And she's a child to boot, so it's like, she's got this whole world of internal conflict on her shoulders. And what is born out of this, of course, because of that discomfited nature, is this wacky dream world scenario where we've got sentient bears and giant mushrooms. And at first I thought they were going to be maybe playing on like the Alice in Wonderland vibe, which I would have actually enjoyed, but it went in quite a different direction. And I found myself just kind of watching largely the majority of the episode kind of mystified and just a very minute level of dissatisfaction. Like, oh, what is this? What is going on? Like through the majority of it. And I have to say, not until Kurumi finally, feels that strength within herself, she realizes this is a product of my mind. From, having Albrecht come to life and be her protector. That's how she sees him in the real world. Without him, she feels completely at a loss, So he is, sort of an extension of her centering herself. And that's the embodiment in this dream world. And okay, that makes sense. But when she realizes this is actually part and parcel of whatever internal thing I'm dealing with, it's all my own concoction. It's taking little, pepper flakes out of all the things I've been thinking about, or things, the way I live, the, foods I like or dislike, and this, that, and the other thing. And it's just like a dream. It's like, everything you encounter for the previous few days, and then suddenly you have a dream where if you remember it the next day, if it's a lucid dream, you can sometimes pick a lot of elements out of, well, this must have been inspired by that, a show I watched, or this must have been inspired by a conversation I had. And that's very much what's going on in this dream world, concoction. But it wasn't until she finally decided to step up and she had the full-on magical girl transformation. It's like it was hallmarked by that moment that suddenly I loved everything after that. I loved everything from that point to the closing of the episode. I just kind of wish more of the episode was that, the embodiment of her finding her strength, the embodiment of her doing so through this transformation and coming into her own. And that was inspiring. I loved the vibe of that. And the fact that as a consequence of what she's able to do, go up against this giant tank-tired, like mecha bear thing with this salmon bear or whatever, this evil bear, because she apparently doesn't like salmon roe. That's what I mean. Peppered out all throughout her life are these little details, and that's what ends up in this concoction when she takes this giant mechanized bear tank thing down, and, as a consequence, as I say, brings that newfound resolve and courage to the fore when, the girls are basically, they want her to be part of their group, and Haruhiko's like, well, I don't know, she's been through a lot, let's not put the pressure on her. And she steps up right there in the end. I loved it. I loved seeing that shot of the 4 girls walking down the hallway, and you see Haruhiko and, Ruru just basically happy to see that. I was happy to see that. And so, as I say, from that transformation portion of the episode on, I loved it. Everything before that, I was just kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't really enjoying it that much. But I will say one thing that struck me by the end of this episode, and sort of playing into the idea that Haruhiko is very much, it's like the Twilight Zone thing. I've talked about this a little bit before, how this series is kind of like a modern day anime version of those classic series like The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone, especially with Haruhiko filling, the Rod Serling sort of prologue of every episode, giving us a little insight as to what might have loosely inspired the story or themes that are related to it and everything like that. And I suddenly found myself thinking of that and then thinking of how this episode ends. Like, I'm the kind of person who every now and then I'll encounter a story, because I'm actually a writer, and I'm very imaginative. I always look for potential twists, and I feel like sometimes, those are the most interesting aspects of the story. And so I found myself looking at Haruhiko and Ruru, looking at the 4 girls leaving, and thinking about that prologue that starts every episode where he is giving us information. And I started to wonder if there could ever potentially be a twist in this series where toward the end we find out Haruhiko is a phantom. Like, maybe he's dead and he doesn't know it. Maybe that's why he's so lonely. Maybe there's nobody in that house because they left a long time ago. And maybe he's just a haunt of that house. And it's very much about, the series is about sort of Ruru guiding him where he's not fully conscious or cognizant of the fact that he is a phantom or a ghost or a spirit and has moved on. And with the help of both Ruru and like the sensei that's trying to get all these girls together, maybe that's the gist of the series. It's very much a product of trying to find the overarching story aspect of the series, because I'm assuming there's got to be one. As episodic in nature as this has been, I have to assume there is an overriding plot line, and it feels like the strongest aspect of that thus far is getting these girls, who are all individualistic, all have their own sort of being like an outcast or being alone, not really fitting in and all this kind of stuff, and something has needed to wedge itself into their lives, affect them in a positive way, to bring them all together. And I'm thinking, well, that's a fairly straight-laced idea, if Haruhiko's able to do this, and we've seen him being very able to do this, but it did leave me thinking like, but that's, at the end of the day, not really that interesting. Unless there becomes some high-level stakes at some point where all of these girls got to utilize their powers together. I was talking with one of you guys in the comments about how, similar this is kind of to like an anime version of Ghostbusters in a way. I mean, it's much more wacky. It's much more anime, comedy trope oriented and things of that sort, and surreal. And but there is an element of that, like maybe Haruhiko is the Slimer, the group who gets these guys, or in this case, these girls together, and they are the Phantom Hunters. They are the Phantom Busters, and I don't know. It's just a matter of trying to really piece together where this is all going. And I like the idea of a twist like that, where all along you're watching is kind of like, if you've ever seen the M. Night Shyamalan film, The Sixth Sense. I won't spoil that for you here if you haven't. But there is a twist involving, somebody is not what you thought they were at first. And it's kind of along those lines, where maybe, I think anyway, I would find it highly intriguing, and I would love it if Haruhiko, proved to be a phantom of sorts, the phantom ringleader, if you will, to get these girls together. Probably will not work out that way at all. I'm just, voicing that sort of speculation and that theorizing and how I might like to see it play out, because I don't know if there's any direction for this other than this episodic nature. And while I came off in the beginning, putting that forth as, well, it's largely episodic, it's largely like these classic Twilight Zone-esque shows and everything where, it's about the idea and expounding upon the imagination and all these fantasy sci-fi concepts. I mean, I love that aspect of it, but it's an anime at the end of the day. We have so many episodes, and it's like, is it going anywhere? Is there an end game? What is the end game, if there is one, and all this kind of stuff? Thinking in terms of, like, is there going to be some sort of uber strong phantom villain of some type that they're going to have to, as I say, combine their powers to defeat? Is there going to be some kind of personal quandary that sees these, girls and Haruhiko and everything having to come together? And I'd actually really, another point that was a topic of discussion with one of you in the comments, I would really love to find out more about Ruru and what, where she came from, where she hails from, because I had speculated that maybe she was a product of Haruhiko's mind, or he called out to her subconsciously or something like that, because why is she so transfixed with him? Why are they married together in a sense, as a duo? How'd that happen and all that kind of stuff, and where is she from and all that. So I mean, it's highly interesting, and this episode, to call back on it, even though I've been all over the place, I enjoyed the latter half of it. Not so much the beginning half with all the wackiness, and it's just, I mean, I can watch that stuff without a problem usually. I don't know, I wasn't feeling it for this episode, much as I wasn't really feeling the look into Reina's mind a couple episodes back, as I say. And it just kind of, once there was something more personal, once there was something more character driven, and we were seeing Reina overcoming, almost slipping into this phantom void through Haruhiko's, calling her back out, or in this episode seeing, Karumi really stepping up to the plate and finding her inner strength. Those aspects saved each of these episodes for me, but the rest of it was just kind of nonsense, and I didn't really get into it. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you've seen this episode of Myriad Colors Phantom World. What you thought of it. I mean, one thing I can definitely say is I love the animation. I love the myriad colors on display, the backgrounds, the character art and everything. It looks exquisite. It's just lacking for the most part in substance. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Love it or hate it. Anything goes. Love having that conversation. And otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. And I'll catch you all later. Peace.